So, individual petition, speaker here, the psalmist, seems to stand in the shoes of a king. It's a morning psalm. Now, there's some interesting literary features here that hit you in the face straight away. First of all is the refrain in verse 6 and verse 12. And then you get a repetition of certain key words: nephesh, throat, soul, self, 3 times, glory, in 2 different senses, God's glory and the psalmist's glory, loving kindness and faithfulness in the refrain, and then making music. There's double duty pivot words that I pointed out to you: God, my glory, Lord, verse 10. And then there is the what scholars call anacrusis, which is that instead of repeating the word, it's understood. Be high covers 2 halves of the verse. May you your loving kindness is great, gadol, over. Now, the structure of the psalm is very interesting and very telling. First of all, you get the heading, and it gives a whole lot of detail, more than usual. Then, secondly, the psalm proper begins with a plea for mercy, grace. There's a petition for mercy. There's the wish for divine intervention. Then there is the report, that's the lament part, on the threat from man-eating lions. The one who hounds him, so you get lions hounding. There's a lion hounding him down. He's surrounded by lions. And then you get a petition for God to show himself in his glory. There's a petition for cosmic theophany. Now, theophany is God's visible appearance on earth. So you get the plea for God's appearance over heaven and earth. Cosmic theophany. Then you get the promise of thanksgiving, which takes a very strange form. It's not your usual vow of thanksgiving. It begins with the report of the fate of the man-eating lions. Now notice the lament part is cut in 2 by this prayer or acclamation. You get the man-eating lions, and then you get the report of the fate of the man-eating lions. Then you get the decision to awaken dawn with song, and a vow to thank God internationally among the nations, to praise him among the nations. And then you get a petition for cosmic theophany. Now, to understand this psalm, you need to get the basic imagery here. And it's complex because it operates at least at 3 levels and probably more. Okay, basically the primary, most literal level of the imagery is the dawn of a new day. You have the sun that rises in dawn, and it shines its light upon the earth with the people and its animals. So every new day, the sun awakens the earth in the morning. So it shines and it wakes up. Critical thing. Now, the sun does 2 things. It not only shines light, but it also does something. That's positively. It does something negatively. What does it deal negatively? It drives out the darkness. Now, it always has the double effect. It enlightens, but it also destroys darkness. Now, this is very important for the whole of the Old Testament and all the talk about God and all the talk about theophany. Wherever God appears, his presence, his appearance has 2 opposite effects. On the one hand, it saves, but it also destroys. judges. So God's presence gives light, salvation, health, but it destroys what? Darkness. It destroys everything that is contrary to God. Okay, notice that double effect of light. Then the second level is the picture of God's theophany, his appearance here on earth. God compared to the sun, ushering in the dawn of a new day, a new age. So this is ordinary daily picture. This is in terms of world history. God, the Lord, shines with his glory, and that glory saves the psalmist. Okay, so there's a theophany. At one point, God will reveal his glory to the whole earth. Here he reveals his glory to the psalmist. And his revelation, his theophany, has two effects. On the one hand, his theophany reveals his loving kindness and his faithfulness to the psalmist, but it also issues in a rebuke to the one who attacks the psalmist. Can you see that two sides? The revelation of God's glory then saves the psalmist who is threatened by night. And the imagery there is of a nightmare. Now, you lie in bed and you're surrounded by monsters. You can't run away from them. They trap you. And the focus is initially on just one enemy, and the picture is of someone who hounds him, or something who hounds him. The enemy, the hound, and behind that lie lions, and these are man-eating lions. Now, then you get the third level of imagery, which is much more complex and very profound. What the psalmist prays for is two things, is that what's happened, three things really. First of all, that God comes in theophany and saves him from his enemy, number one. And then he prays, may God appear in theophany over the whole earth. So personal theophany, cosmic theophany. And then you get the third kind of theophany, and John Wesley picks it up in his hymn, is theophany within his heart. So theophany not just to him, but theophany in him. What the psalmist sings is a theophany of God within his heart. So the picture is of the Lord shining with his glory. That glory awakes the heart of the psalmist. And then you got a funny thing, the psalmist with his music and song awakes the glory. There's a double awakening. So the glory awakes the heart. The heart is ready and sings the glory into itself. So the kind of circuit here. And this is done by thanksgiving and music. Okay? So that's by means of singing thanksgiving and music, the psalmist awakens his heart, and the heart then awakens its glory, God's glory within it. And that glory then is revealed in song to the nations.
Could this be like before, middle and background? Does it work that way?
No, I don't think it works quite that way, because this is the foreground here.
Okay.
So it works in three ways. I haven't got the third way here, because there's the cosmic theophany, which is prayed for. But this recalls that, and it leads to that. But if you like, this is the central line of the psalm. That's the foreground. Now, I put it in diagrammatic form because of its imaginative complexity and profundity. I'm amazed at this psalm. And every time I look at it, I sort of pinch myself and say, hey, this is just simply wonderful. Okay, introduction. Now, exegesis itself. Explanation. First of all, the title. Number one, this psalm is a miktam. Now, it means that it's written down, and it's probably placed as an inscription, as a votive offering to God in a sanctuary. If you go to Catholic churches, very famous pilgrim things, you'll find all sorts of votive offerings, things that people offer to God and place in God's presence. This here was a psalm that David, or a king, wrote, and it wasn't just sung, but it was written, maybe in a stone tablet, and placed somewhere in the temple in the presence of God. So it wasn't just sung for God to hear, but it was placed there for God to see. That's the miktam element. Do not destroy, okay, is saying, don't destroy, don't remove this inscription because it's a votive offering. I want it to stand in God's presence forever. So do not destroy. And then it mentions the situation of David. It could have arisen then. David could have composed it then. But it's, whatever the case, whether he did or didn't, it is to be used in any life-threatening situation. Like Saul, remember, chasing David. And you remember the story? David's in the cave. Saul comes in with his men. He's trapped. But Saul goes in there to relieve himself. David cuts off the corner throat. He thinks he's finished, but he has this miraculous escape from Saul. So it can be used in any life-threatening situation. Okay, let's have a look at the first part of the psalm, 2 through to 6. Have mercy on me, O God. Have mercy on me, or be gracious to me, O God, be gracious to me. For in you my soul takes refuge, or has taken refuge probably. And in the shadow of your wings I take refuge, and I will take refuge until the disaster passes by. I call to God Most High, to God who deals well with me. May he reach from heaven to save me, challenging, rebuking the one who hounds me. May God send his loving kindness and his faithfulness. Notice the two sides there, negative, rebuke, positive, salvation. My soul is in the midst of lions. I lie in the midst of those who devour the sons of Adam, whose teeth are spear and arrow, we'd say spears and arrows, and whose tongue is a sharp sword. Be high, O God, above the heavens. Be high with your glory over all the earth. The psalm begins with a petition to God for his mercy. The situation of the psalmist is that he's threatened by destruction of those who hound him, or more exactly by one being who hounds him. Notice the single hound. Threatening animal. And in the face of the threat, then, he takes refuge under God's wings. Now, there's three levels here of symbolism which operate. First of all, the most literal for us is chicks taking refuge under the wings of a mother hen for protection, warmth, nurture. Now, you get that same image being used then with the cherubim in the Holy of Holies. Remember, you have the Ark of the Covenant, mercy seat, and over the mercy seat you get the cherubim that form the sides and the back of the throne of God. So the wings, you take refuge under the wings of the cherubim, angel wings. Angels as bodyguards. Behind that, which is not so obvious to us, is the common ancient picture of the sun as with wings, the protective, nurturing, life-giving wings of the sun.
Why you use chicks and hens? Why not an eagle?
Because an eagle is the chicks are in the nest, the eagle, okay, and they're just there, and then the eagle comes and sits on them. So it's not something they do. But the picture here is of a mother bird and her little chicks of some kind going out there being threatened, and when danger comes, the mother goes cluck, 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 and they come running and she shelters them. So it's that aspect. By the way, this thing of wings too is eagle. This is closely connected with eagle. There's close connection in ancient symbolism between eagle and sun, which you'll see everywhere in the ancient world, and almost everywhere until modern times. One of those universal symbols. So what happens here is that the psalmist appeals to God for grace. Notice he doesn't say, it's not justice, it's not claiming his rights, but he makes an appeal to grace, like a needy subject with the king of a nation. And then you get the wish of the psalmist. Notice that these are not imperatives, they are justives expressing what the psalmist would like from God. Notice the careful nuancing. There is the imperative, have mercy on me. And then I'd expect him to say, reach out and save me. Okay? But it's expressed in wish form, saying, okay, so there's some room here for God to, God's discretion. Exactly how it's done. Now, and this is addressed not to God, but to a human audience as a kind of blessing. May God, not may you, second person, but third person, may God send. So there's the wish for God's intervention addressed to, spoken to himself and a human audience. God is addressed as with the title Elyon, the Most High, the High One, the chief God. It's taken from El, who was the chief God, the supreme head of the Canaanite pantheon, and it was then shifted across to Yahweh. You get a lot of titles of other gods that are appropriated by the Lord in the Old Testament. Now, why Most High in this context? Why is God here addressed as not just as God or Lord, but as Most High One? He's over everything. It's cosmic. That title Elyon, the highest, is a cosmic title. So he's not just Lord over me personally, or over Israel, or over the earth, but it's cosmic in its dimension. So it's cosmic terminology. Something, by the way, which has been lost in modern theology until fairly recent times. The fashion, ever since Schleiermacher, is to see God's working and understand him purely in personal and subjective terms, but not God in cosmic terms. God here is addressed as, or confessed as, the one who avenges those who seek justice from him. He intervenes to challenge and to save the psalmist from the one who hounds him. Notice the singular there. I've commented on this already. You get this shift from enemies to enemy. You get the shift from foes to foe. You get the shift from wicked ones to the wicked one. A lot of this doesn't come through in translation, because there's no way of distinguishing those two usually in simple, plain English. Now you get Not the ones who hound me, that's what I'd expect, but the one who hounds me. So God rebukes, challenges, intervenes with his word, and he sends his loving kindness and his truth as bodyguards, as crack soldiers to come to rescue. So it's sort of the sheriff sending a posse to save a guy in desperate trouble. That's the picture here. Now, then you get the psalmist's evaluation of his threat, which is part of the complaint. He's speaking not to God, but he's speaking to himself, interestingly. So it's a bit of a shift here in the lament part. The psalmist sees himself as a person lying down to sleep among man-eating lions. The picture here is of nightmare, a nightmare kind of scenario. I'm lying in bed and I'm surrounded, helpless, I can't move myself, paralysed, and I'm surrounded by lions. And they aren't ordinary lions, they're flaming lions who threaten to devour me. The picture here is of the psalmist's enemy and enemies as lions. Now, once again, you get a stock image which is common in the ancient world. Now, if you want to understand imagery, you've got to see that sometimes one image can be used in many different ways, but from the starting point is always to start as concretely as possible. Okay, in ancient Israel and the Middle East, what was characteristic of the lion?
Teeth.
Yeah, just within the animal kingdom, you've got to think in terms of animal classification. He's king of the beasts. There's two things. He's the king of the jungle, king of the beasts. Now, the beasts are what? Wild animals. So he's not the king of the domesticated animals.
That's the ox.
That's the ox. The king of the herd, flock of sheep. The king of the herd is the ox, but then you get the flock is the ram. And the king of the sheep, which is part of the flock, is the ram. So you get the billy goat. The he goat actually is the head. You know, if you get sheep and goats together, the billy goat's the number one honcho. So, number one, lion's always a symbol of kingship, and particular kingship. Now, if you think in political terms, lion king, beasts are what?
People.
Which people?
Non-Christian.
Non-Jews. Non-Jews. The goyim, the nation. So the king of the nations. Okay, that's one range of imagery. But lions are not just kings of the beasts, but they are predators. Now, within the beast, you get a whole number of wild animals. You get a class of animals that are predators. Now, what are predators? They don't prey on other creatures. They don't prey on plants and fruit.
No, I'm saying other animals.
Other animals. So they prey on their own kind. So you get the predatory one. So the king of the predators. And whereas this can be the Lord, you can... the Lion of Judah. C.S. Lewis, Aslan, uses that picture of lion. Now, there's a number, then you go the other way, that the Bible uses lion.
The enemy prowls like a lion looking for souls to devour.
Okay, so it's used of the devil. Now, which way is the image of lion used here? This here of a predator, and as the king of the predators, lions. So the enemies are lions, they are devouring predators, and you get the surreal picture here. If you go to Oth Michael and symbolism in the ancient world, you sometimes see a lion standing on its back legs, raised up with claws out, and then you have, instead of having the mouth agape, instead of having normal tongue, the tongue is depicted as a sword, and the teeth are depicted as, guess what? Knives. Spears, javelins, probably javelins, so javelin, knife, spear, and then you get things being emitted, you get stylized stuff coming out of the mouth, so you get a sword, knives, spears. A spear is a knife on a handle, and then you get things flying out, arrows. Now, wherever you get that, you have depicted not your normal lion, but demonic powers. So you know this is demonic symbol of some demonic power. Okay, so this is symbols of demons in the ancient world. Now, the key, the pivotal of the psalm is the antiphon, "Be high, O God, above the heavens, be high with your glory over all the earth." Now, this can function in one of two ways. It can be a prayer. Be high. May you, I pray, it's imperative, be high. But it also functions as an acclamation, as a kind of almost blessing kind of formula, but as an acclamation which was used also as a war cry in ancient Israel.
It's like saying to arms, like they're not going to grab their swords when the enemy's coming, but
yes.
Still you say to arms.
Yes, to arms, yes. So it's a war cry and it's an acclamation, so it's an act of praise. But here, first of all, the first usage is basically in its imperative sense. It's a petition, and it's a petition for God's theophany. And here, the petition is not for God's theophany to the psalmist, but God's theophany to the whole cosmos, heaven and earth. Be high. Oh, yes. Be high, where above the heavens, with your glory over all the earth. So this is not just God's theophany in human history, but his prayer for the cosmic theophany of God. So it's an appeal for God's theophany, but not as you'd expect in judgment, which is there, but in loving kindness and in faithfulness. But theophany always has two sides to it. Brings judgment of the wicked, destruction of darkness, and the vindication of the righteous. So the picture here is of God as the sun, with his glory as God's light, God's radiance, that will fill heaven and earth with his presence, so that heaven and earth becomes what? The temple of God. So just God's glory is in heaven. His radiance, his presence. It is hidden in a cloud, and it's located in the temple in Jerusalem. The prayer now is that instead of just that little building being the temple of God, the whole cosmos will be his temple. That's what's involved in cosmic theophany, that the whole cosmos becomes the temple of God. So you get that three levels then. God's glory up in heaven, God's glory which is in the temple now, and then the prayers for God's glory which is in heaven and hidden in the temple being revealed openly to the whole cosmos. Then the second part of the psalm begins in a strange way. It's lament kind of thing, but it's actually a confession of faith. They have set a net for my steps. My soul is bent low. They have dug a pit for me. Lament, part. But then you get something funny. They have fallen into it. Now, this is a theme that runs all the way through the Old Testament about the nature of evil and evildoers. How does God deal with evil?
Smites it.
Well, that's what we think. He smites at evil. He doesn't have to smite evil. He just lets it loose on itself. Evil is self-destructive. Evildoers destroy themselves. The boomerang you throw comes back and hits you. The pit you dig for others, you fall into yourself. The net you lay to trap somebody else, you are entrapped yourself. Now, this is not karma. This is not a cosmic principle. But it's essential to Hinduism and Buddhism, by the way, if you're going to understand them, the law of karma, that what you give, you get back. But this is God's judgment. This is the way God deals with evil. Uses evil, paradoxically, to undo evil, to destroy itself.
It's active, not passive.
It's active, it's not passive, it's not just a general law, but it's God's activity. Then you get the break there. My heart is ready, O God, my heart is ready. Let me sing, let me make music. Awake, my glory, awake. What on earth is my glory here? Notice the shift from God's glory to my glory. Awake, my glory, awake. With harp and lyre, let me wake the dawn. How do I wake the dawn? This is the way I wake the dawn. I give thanks about you among the nations, my God. I make music about you among the peoples. For your loving kindness is great in the heavens, and your faithfulness to the skies. Be high, O God, above the heavens. Be high with your glory over all the earth. Now you've got a complex picture here. It's night time. If you like, this is just very literal. The psalmist has awakened from a terrible nightmare, a demonic attack in the middle of the night, and it's still dark. Now, before the sun arises, he gets up and he takes his guitar, and what does he do?
Well, he makes coffee and then he sings.
He tunes it. He makes coffee and then he sings, and he sings a song of praise to usher in the morning. So in two ways, if you like, he sings the day, the coming of a day. He ushers in the coming of the day by singing the song before the day comes. So it's the song of praise before the coming of the day, and he brings in the day with the song of praise. But more importantly, he sings God's glory where? Into his heart. And you get the dawning of a new day in his own heart. And he sings the dawning of a new day while it's still night out there to the nations. You get the basic picture? See that, and then now the rest will fall into place. Now, take note, and I've given you many cases of this, and the Scripture's full of it, and the Psalms even more so than Scripture in general. You get the reversal of expectations, the strange twists. You get an image that's revised, turned on its head. You get a cliche that's turned around. Now, this is a classical case. Usually, dawn awakens a person. In the ancient world, rural society, you don't have alarm clocks. You don't have automatic coffee machines that wake you up by the smell of coffee, Harry. But what wakes you up from your sleep?
Sunshine.
The sunshine. Now, this is turned around. Instead of the sun, dawn awakening the psalmist, what does the psalmist do? He awakens the dawn.
Better than sleeping and having that nightmare again.
Yeah. Now, can I put it to you, that is your basic vocation as a Christian and as a pastor, to live as in the darkness and to usher in the light of a new day. Beautiful picture. Very, very profound picture. The promise, or the promise of rescue by God leads to a song of praise already before the rescue, the song of praise before the dawn. So instead of praising God after the rescue, after the nightmare, you praise God in the nightmare situation. The psalmist awakens three things with his song. First of all, not most obviously, but most importantly, the psalmist wakens his own heart. He gets his musical instrument ready, tunes it up, and then with the song of praise, he awakens his heart. He sings about the glory of God, so that God's glory, which is up in heaven, becomes manifest, shines into his heart. So he is glorified, his heart is glorified as it glorifies God. So awake my glory means awake my heart with the glory of God that shines where? In it. You see, right? Because that's the first awakening. Then there is the awakening of the harp and the lyre. Now, getting it actually going. Turning on the record player. And then thirdly, there's the awakening of the dawn of a new day, not just for him, but for all the nations of the earth, in which God comes in his glory, not primarily to judge, but to save, and with the light of his mercy, his loving kindness, and his steadfast love. So you get the picture of dawn. Okay, I'm dealing with lots of images here. The dawn of a new day, and there are four dimensions to this dawning new day. First of all, there's a liturgical dimension. The psalmist begins the new day with morning prayer and praise. And the time of morning prayer and praise is not after dawn, but before dawn. By the way, this is very important for the monastic tradition.
Office of hours.
The hours doesn't begin at sunrise, matins, but it begins a prime, which is before dawn, the dawn of a new day. So you usher in the new day liturgically with the singing of a song of praise. Then secondly, the picture of dawn is understood in musical terms. Okay, person who, you have a person and his musical instruments that are silent become activated. So you get the music being played and the song being sung. The morning song, which is played on harp or lyre, as before the dawn of a new day. Then you get the third level, which is the devotional level, which comes out of this. So liturgical, musical, devotional now. By the singing of this song of grace, the song which says, "Be high with your glory above the heaven and your glory over the earth," is the dawning of the glory of God, his radiance, his gracious presence in the heart of the psalmist, which becomes a temple of God. If you think of God's glory being in the Holy of Holies, what happens there through the song of praise is that the heart of the psalmist becomes the place of God's glory, God's presence, and his body becomes a shrine, a temple of the living God. And then there is the eschatological cosmic picture of the dawning of the new day, God's theophany and final victory over all the powers of darkness. Now you get the three dimensions here. There's the basic imagery is the sun with its glory, its radiance, which dispels night all over the earth. Then you get the picture then of light dealing with darkness, and God's glory dealing with lions which represent not just God's human enemies, although they're included, but they have to do with his cosmic enemies, the cosmic powers that darken the earth. As I indicated before, Ura, wake, is a battle cry in Israel. This is the cry of a leader to the troops to get ready and to prepare for battle. So now you get this battle cry which is spoken to God to awake and to do battle with cosmic powers and to display his radiance. The singer calls on his glory, that's his own glory, not just God's glory, to wake up, overcome the powers of darkness in himself, the nightmare, demonic attacks, and to announce the new day. His glory is his glorified, God's glorifying self. So if you like, my glory is the glory of God in my heart. Picture God in me. And God's glory is manifested in the psalmist by the singing of this song. His glory is present. So there's a kind of circuit here. The song manifests the glory. The song evokes the glory. The glory is the content of the song. And so what this describes is the experience of theophany within his heart, described very well by that lovely old hymn of John Wesley that we sang. The experience of theophany. There's, if you like, there's 4 levels to the awakening of dawn by the awakened singer with his song. There's the awakening of a new day, quite literally, beginning of the new day. There's the awakening of the sleeping harp and lyre. So the lyre and harp are compared to people asleep. There's the awakening of the heart as the temple of God. And there's the awakening of God for his theophany. You rise up, O God, you wake, O God, and appear. Then, lastly, you get the vow of thanksgiving, not so much a vow of thanksgiving, but an act of thanksgiving. I give thanks about you among the nations, my God. I make music about you among the peoples, for your loving kindness is great to the heavens, and your faithfulness to the skies. Be high, O God, above the heavens, be high with your glory over all the earth. There's the vow of thanksgiving, which is actually the beginning of thanksgiving. So it functions in 2 ways. You can see this is a vow of praise, but here in the context, it's also the beginning of praise. Now notice that here you get praise before the rescue rather than after the rescue. And there's the promise here of the psalmist that he will praise God not just to himself or to his family or to Israel, but internationally. So there's the promise of international praise. Now, why does the psalmist praise God to the nations? Well, there's 2 reasons for it. Number 1 is that God's loving kindness, his faithfulness, is not just to him, is not just to the nation of Israel, but God's loving kindness, his faithfulness is offered and is available and wants to be given by God to all the nations of the earth. So all the nations of the earth are going to be beneficiaries of God's self-disclosure. And secondly, the theophany is not just personal or historical, but is cosmic. The theophany is over heaven and the whole earth. So in this psalm, the psalmist proclaims God's glory and his grace to the nations in a song of praise. The song of thanksgiving is, if you like, an anticipation of the universal theophany of God as King of the cosmos. So can you see the stupendous claim here that what's happening to me this morning when I wake up from my nightmare in the darkness is the beginning of something cosmic in its significance and is connected with this. Or turn it the other way around, what happens to me now anticipates what will happen then finally. You get the same petition in verse 12 as in verse 6. Now, it can be taken in two ways. Number one, it's a petition for God to be high. And be high means triumph over. But it can also be a kind of acclamation. God, you are high over heaven and earth. So it's an act of praise. Lastly, note that parts of this psalm are used in a different way in a corporate national lament in Psalm 108, 1-5, where it has to do with Israel and Israel's enemies, but it's taken in a completely different direction there. Now, does somebody have to go? Yes, okay. Now, just the liturgical and theological use of this. Sadly, this psalm is not very well known in our modern church. It's not used very much. In contrast to it, it was one of the favourite psalms in the Jewish tradition and in the classical Christian tradition. And most appropriately, it's traditionally set as part of the introit, therefore the psalm, for Ash Wednesday, in which we prepare for Good Friday and the cosmic victory of the resurrection on Easter Sunday. It's a part of set for St. Mark's Day. Do you know what the symbol of Mark is? Here's the lion. Okay, Mark the lion. And the whole of Mark's gospel has to do with spiritual warfare, the battle between Christ and the demons, the evil powers, and Christ's victory, his paradoxical victory on the cross over all evil powers. So it's a most appropriate psalm for St. Mark. Three other very important applications traditionally. Number one, it's used devotionally as one of the classical morning prayers. Now, the prayers for prime, matins, morning devotions, quite obviously. So it's used in morning prayers. It's part of meditation there on the dawn of the day in our hearts as temples by the visitation of Christ, the morning star. Now, the symbol of the morning star, you get the morning star shining bright before the dawn of the new day. Now, every person in the ancient world where they didn't have clocks, if you were working at night time, would know that dawn was coming close, not just by the light in the east, but the fact that the morning star shines most brightly just before the dawn and the sunrise. So you get the picture of Jesus as the morning star, which picks up all this imagery. It's very, very important in the book of Revelation. Psalm 528 is a meditation on this psalm. Next, classically in our Christian tradition, it's used in connection with and for spiritual warfare. temptate, what Luther calls tentatio, and rightly so. St. Peter in his Gospel speaks about be sober, be vigilant, means awake. Vigilant means awake, picking up this psalm. Why? Because your adversary, the devil, as a roaring lion, prowls around seeking someone to devour. Whom resist steadfast in faith. Can you see that that's an exegesis of, or application of this psalm in many ways? The devil's the roaring lion. Notice that how does Jesus deal with Satan and the evil spirits, the unclean spirits? He doesn't have to be engaged physically with them. He deals with them by rebuking them. Very, very strong all the way through the Gospel. It's his word that deals with them.
With the dog metaphor, doesn't it? Get out.
Yep. The yelling at the thing. But he doesn't even yell. The rebuke is sometimes it's an angry rebuke, and that's quite clear, but normally he just sends them packing with his word. Spiritual warfare, where basically we are rescued by Christ, who fights for us and delivers us. We have victory over the powers of darkness by taking refuge in the Lord, and in two ways, by praying and by praising Him. Two basic weapons, or three basic weapons in spiritual warfare: the name of the Lord, prayer, and praise. Luther puts it brilliantly. He says the devil, the evil spirits, cannot bear the name of God, cannot tolerate the exercise of faith in prayer, cannot tolerate the praise of God. It's cacophony in their ears. So classical psalm for all the most important elements of spiritual warfare. Lastly, whether you realise it or not, it's a set part of our liturgy in the Sanctus. If you go, the Sanctus originates in the vision of Isaiah, which is holy. Is a proclamation. Holy, 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 Lord God of hosts, the whole earth is full of your glory. Now, there's a Christian addition to that. It's not just the whole earth is full of your glory. We say heaven and earth are full of your glory. Notice heaven and earth, cosmic theophany. And where do we get an anticipation of the cosmic theophany and the beginning of the heavenly song of praise? It's in the Eucharist, the Lord's Supper. So you get this borrowing of this from here and some other places in the Old Testament in the way we use the Sanctus in the communion liturgy. Okay, next lesson, which is Friday, I think, will begin the very famous and wonderful Psalm 51.